What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Speak Up for Blue podcast. I am your host, Andrew Lewin. I hope you had a great weekend. I had quite the weekend. I ticked off something on my bucket list that I've never done before. That's why it's on my bucket list. I did a sprint triathlon, which is a 750-meter swim, a 20-kilometer bike ride, and a 5-kilometer run. That's something I've never done before, nor I didn't think I ever wanted to. But a bunch of friends from my CrossFit gym decided, hey, we're going to do this sprint triathlon. Why don't you come along? And I did it. Probably wasn't my best performance. I'm not a very good long distance swimmer, but I completed it. And I'm pretty happy about myself right now. A little sore, but pretty happy about myself. So anyway, it just goes to show that you can do anything you put your mind to, including doing a podcast for over 2 years, 3 episodes a week, which is quite the feat in itself. So I encourage all of you to do something this week or something this month that you've never really done before. It kind of puts you out of your comfort zone because it kind of makes you think you can, a little bit like you're like Superman or Superwoman, depending on who you are. And I just love the fact. I just wanted to share that with you because it's something that I never thought I would be able to, nor wanted to do, and I did it, and I was pretty psyched to do it. So today on the program, we've got a story. It's going to be a quick program. We got a story about that I found about sea otters eating Pacific giant octopus, which is kind of interesting because we covered a story like that before with dolphins in Australia. Not the Pacific giant octopus, but something, a smaller octopus, but still. I'll talk about what the concerns are about that and why it's so cool and why sea otters do this, or potentially why sea otters do this. And then we're also going to talk about something that I've been looking into for a while. It's changing human behavior around the ocean. It's really why I started Speak Up for Blue, and we're going to go into a little bit about that towards the end of the episode, and then we'll wrap up. So that's the episode for today. That's what we're going to be covering. If you want to discuss anything on this episode or on the past episodes, or you want me to cover anything on the future episodes, go to our Speak Up for Blue Facebook community page or group, Facebook group. It's a lot of fun. A lot of people are joining it. There's over 250 members already, and I love it. Like it's one of the things that I do most now. I hang out there 2 or 3 times a day, answer questions, comment on stories that are being shared, and I think it's a really, really fun thing to do. I actually get a lot of my material from there to put on this podcast because the members that listen to the podcast say, hey, can you cover this? Or hey, can you cover that? And I try and do my best to accommodate. So if you go to speakupforblue.com/group, I'd love for you to join the group. Just use your Facebook account, request to join. I'll be in there to let you in. The only reason I have a request to join is and not just open to anybody. It's just I don't want spammers. So I just got to make sure that you're a real person and you're not a fake account. And you show something towards the ocean that you want to share with us, and then let you in. It's a really simple process. And when you get in there, introduce yourself. Tell us why you like the ocean so much and what you want to do to help out or how you want to help. I think that's one of the biggest things that you can do. So with that said, go to speakupforblue.com/group and let's start the show. If you are sick of hearing of the doom and gloom of the ocean and not knowing what to do, you're in the right place. If you want to meet people working to protect the ocean, then you are in the right place. If you want to find out how you can get involved in protecting the ocean, then you are in the right place. This is the Speak Up for Blue podcast, and I am here to empower you to live for a better ocean. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the Speak Up for Blue podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, founder of SpeakUpForBlue.com, marine ecologist, and self-proclaimed oceanpreneur. Look guys, I can't believe I did a triathlon. A sprint triathlon, but a triathlon no less. It's something that psyched me, that's gotten me psyched. I was sore, I was feeling bad yesterday, but I'm feeling better this morning. By the way, this is like a couple of hours before I posted this, so I'm on the pulse. So usually I record before the weekend's up, but this time I decided to record Monday morning, just cause. And it's one of those things where I find that I can relate it a lot with marine conservation because a lot of people who may not be in the industry, so doing this full time, whether you're a scientist or a conservationist or both, you may not understand what you can do what you can actually accomplish when you want to. And when you're able to accomplish something like a triathlon, you can do so much more, and you can put your mind to something else. I did the training. I worked through the pain. I worked through every stage of this triathlon. When I got out of the swim, I wasn't feeling well. I was dizzy. I thought I was going to throw up, but I kept pushing on. I just calmed myself down, kept pushing on, went into the bike, had trouble with my bike, couldn't figure out the gears because it wasn't my bike. I borrowed it from a friend. Finally figured out the gears, caught up to some people, wasn't getting past as much. And then I got to the run, and I knew I just had to get it done, finished it off. And I find it's the same thing when we talk about things to do around the ocean. When it's really difficult to start. It's like, oh, I should do this, or oh, I should do that. And it's very difficult to do that kind of thing. But once you get into it, once you get your mindset and you start doing these little things, either around the house or anything like that, you find yourself, you're proud of yourself, and you can find you can do more. And I think that's what's important in this respect. You can actually do more. So I want you guys to be aware of that. It's just a quick message just to say, hey, you can do anything. You can start conserving for the ocean. We're going to talk a little bit about the difference in terms of awareness and social change in a second at the end of this episode. But I just wanted to let you guys know from the get-go, like, this triathlon really inspired me that I could really do anything, if I put my mind to it. So just a little message, a little motivation message for Monday, a little Monday motivation. But anyway, let's get into the story that I found today. This actually was posted on Earth Touch News Network by Sarah Kurtz, who's a friend of the podcast. And she posted this back in July, beginning of July. And it was a story of a woman, Emily Clark? Let me just see here. Emma Luck. And she took a picture. She's up in Alaska, Juneau, Alaska, and she took a picture of a sea otter. But in this sea otter's hand is a Pacific giant octopus. Now, these things are massive, the octopus. And sea otters, not so massive. And at so she took a picture. I'm looking at the picture right now. You'll probably see it if you go to the website, speakupforblue.com/blog, you'll see it on the website. And you'll see that this little cute sea otter has this giant Pacific octopus. Obviously, it looks dead. It hasn't been moving around, and is going to eat it for food. And the story progresses as this octopus also has this sea otter also has other sea otters beside it, look like pups. And it's a really interesting article because it goes on with, Emma Luck found this thing, took a picture, part of a Rainbow Tours charter that operates out of Juneau, and it looks really cool. And it's like, oh, okay, so it's feeding on an octopus, but there's a little bit of a difference here. Octopus aren't easy to eat, and I covered in a story. I covered this process in a story where dolphins have actually died attempting to hunt an octopus. And the reason why they die is because even though there's a nervous system and it's decentralized in an octopus, that even if you rip it apart, that if you eat an arm, it'll go down the throat, and it'll still suck onto the throat and cause the dolphin to asphyxiate. So it basically chokes to death. So it's not an easy thing to do, and the story was all based on how these dolphins are literally throwing the octopus in the air, ripping them apart, and they look actually terrifying. And that's what a lot of people were saying. But what it is they're actually eating them. One, because they're rich in protein, so they're very good for the animal. But two, they're actually eating them. They're actually destroying them and eviscerating them because they want to eat them for their protein, and it's a high nutrient diet. So, what's interesting is this sea otter, who normally you find in pictures eating like clams or scallops or mussels and things in a hard shell, and you see them breaking the urchins too. You see them breaking the shell off, and they've got very able hands or appendages to actually rip these things apart. And this one was an octopus. And what's interesting, the article goes on, Sarah did a really good job in explaining why pups why a sea otter with her pups would eat a a Pacific giant octopus. And it goes on by saying, essentially, the mother loses a lot. The whole sea otter in itself, it keeps warm based on its metabolic rate, not fat, but metabolic rate. So there's two ways actually. It'll blow bubbles in its fur so that the water won't contact the skin, so it won't get cold from water contacting the skin. And the other one is just a fast metabolic rate, so it needs to eat a lot and constantly. So it's different from like where a marine mammal will just put on fat, right? This one, the sea otter, will actually have a higher metabolic rate, so it needs to eat a lot more. Then you've got a sea otter mother feeding her pups with probably milk and whatnot, and so she's eating for two essentially. And so sea otters need to consume about 25% of their body weight food each day. So in fact, it says here they burn calories nearly 3 times faster than any other marine mammal. So that they lack in that blubbery insulation, the otters rely on their high metabolic rate to keep warm in the open ocean. So they expend a lot of energy grooming themselves, blowing bubbles into the dense underfur, and that takes a while, and that takes it takes a lot of energy to do. Plus, feeding and one, catching the animal, feeding on it, ripping it apart. That also takes a lot out of their metabolic rate. So they need to really constantly do this. So having a giant Pacific octopus or a Pacific giant octopus is great for them. And it goes on. The article goes on to saying sea otters can eat about 50 different species. However, each individual will only eat maybe 2 or 3 species in an area. And it's usually passed down on a behavioral response from their mother. So the pups will eat what their mother's eating, and then they'll go eat what the mother has eaten, has taught them to eat, because they can catch them efficiently and whatnot. And researchers are thinking that that's a good way to keep competition out from other sea otters and keep conflict out from other sea otters. They just stick to a specific species. So one mother might eat a different species than another mother, and then that's how they kind of keep to each other, keep to themselves, and keep competition low between sea otters. But in the amount of food they have to go back to the amount of food they have to eat. Apparently, to refuel, an adult otter can eat about 2 tons of food per year. And they say when they're in zoos, it actually costs them $20,000 a year to house a single otter, and a grocery bill that makes them the most expensive animals relative to size to keep in captivity. That's insane, because you look at this little sea otter and you're like, that's nothing. But it's their metabolic rate, not their fat. It's their metabolic rate that actually keeps them warm, because they don't have that much fat. And I mean, imagine like blowing bubbles constantly, because they must pop, blowing bubbles into their underfur to make sure that they don't get cold. That's a pretty high maintenance upkeep, right? For themselves anyway. So it's kind of a really cool article, and I suggest I'll put it in the show notes. I suggest you take a look at it, because it's just it's a fun article to read. And it's a fun article just to think these sea otters are so smart. And you always see them like looking around, and they're just kind of chilling out on the top. And they're like, looks like they're grooming themselves, and they spend most of their time grooming themselves. And although they're not really known to eat the occasional giant Pacific octopus, they actually, they'll take it once or twice a year. It'd be interesting to see, especially what Emma Luck says, the photographer in this story. It'd be interesting to see how they actually catch these Pacific octopuses. Is it something that they're already dead and they just catch them, or they actually catch them and kill them and then bring them up to the surface so they can eat? It's a really interesting, area. But one thing that is interesting as well, not on a good note, is that a lot of communities view these animals as sea rats, and that they decimate the local ecosystems. So they have a bad reputation, but mostly it's undeserved, right? So even though they can eat 50 different prey types, they can actually be good for the environment. We've seen, when you're in science, you learn about the food web a lot of times through the example of the sea otter, sea urchin, kelp, forest kind of dynamic, where when sea otters went down, because people were hunting them for their pelts, when sea otters population went down, the urchin population, which is a prey for sea otters, actually went up, which decreased the kelp forest because urchins eat kelp, especially in California. So that is a big habitat for, in California. And that makes a difference. So when you have, you have the decimation of a habitat, you're losing a lot of habitat for many different species. So bringing the sea otters back actually lowered protecting the sea otters, lowered the urchin species, or urchin population, and then brought back the kelp forest. Very interesting food web possibility right there. So not all sea otters are sea rats. Probably a terrible name for them, but a lot of people think that they destroy the environment because they do have quite the appetite and they do eat quite a lot, and they need to keep up their metabolic rate. So not a lot of people know that. So I wanted to share that story with you just because I thought it was cool. I think sea otters are amazing. It's a cool mammal. They're very, very curious. If I see them, I've never seen them in the wild. I have seen them in a zoo or in an aquarium, and they are so much fun to watch. I'd love to see one and just watch one in the wild just to see what they do. Hopefully I'll get that time. Another thing on my bucket list, other than a triathlon, maybe a little easier on the body than a triathlon. Anyway, let's move on to our next sort of topic, because this is something that I've just been thinking based on yesterday's triathlon. Afterwards, on the way home, we had quite the ride home. We had to wait 45 minutes. It was on Toronto Island, so we had to wait 45 minutes for the ferry, and then we were in traffic all the way back to Burlington, which took almost an hour to get home, more than like an hour, almost 2 hours to get home. So it had quite the time to think, and everybody was in their own spaces and kind of foggy. And I was thinking, of course, of the ocean. And I was thinking, last week I went to Duke University, and it's a sort of a special plan that I'm going to be teaching in their exec ed course. They have an executive education course at Duke University on environmental communications, and it's important because I'm a big fan of science communication for the environment, and that's what it's a certificate that you can get, anybody can get. Through Duke University. It's not a degree, but it's a certificate, and you get to learn a lot. You get to learn about documents. You get to learn about writing for different audiences, writing in science for different audiences. You get to, what's the other course? You get to learn how to make sort of a conservation plan, almost like a campaign, but a conservation plan. And then you get to learn about social marketing. And social marketing it feels like for me, it feels like it's a new topic. I really learned a lot about it last year at the International Marine Conservation Congress, where they had a whole session on it, a whole morning session on it. And I didn't really know what it was. I thought when I went in, I'm like, oh, it's probably all about social media. But you can't get it confused with social media because it's a little different. You can use social marketing, or you can use social media to get your social marketing message out. But social marketing is essentially, it's the, I guess the definition I would say it's the ability to change human behavior around a specific topic. So in our case, it would be around the environment. It would be around the ocean. And it's important to me to learn about this subject because I'm trying to think here. It's early in the morning. I'm trying to think here. It's important for me to think about this subject because I'm all about making you aware, raising awareness for what's happening in the ocean. But I found out that there's a difference between making people aware and changing their behavior. And making people aware, that's great. Once people know about it, they're just like, oh yeah, okay, well that's interesting. And they want to know more a lot of the times, right? Sometimes they don't want to know anymore. They're like, oh, it's too depressing. I don't want to know about this ocean issue. Or, oh, it's good that you have, an optimistic, a successful project that you're telling me about, but that's great. It's working. Or people are like, what do I do next? Once they learn about something. And a lot of times they'll join the group, they'll get more aware, they'll make other people aware, and that's great. But this is more talking about how do you change human behavior around the ocean, right? That's our topic. It's around a specific topic. And it's really interesting. So it's just there's an organization called Rare, and it's an organization that's really, they focus around that approach, right? It's to change the relationship between people and the planet, and they have this blueprint that they use. So they on their website it says they identify a challenge, they identify the bright spots around that area, they develop pilot sites, which is essentially they identify sites that they can work in. They look at a low-cost delivery at scale, and then they do a government option, and then they do replicate the blueprint. And essentially what they do is they take something of pride of the island. So say in one case, I sat in, there's a YouTube talk that I watched, and it was I think it was the executive director of Rare who did a talk with WWF for WWF at a conference. And they videotaped it, and he said they took, I think it was like some type of bird. I don't remember exactly. It was a while ago. Some type of bird in St. Lucia. That was, the population of that bird was decreasing. It was a species at risk. And what they did is they took that bird and they made it a mascot, and they made it an item of pride for the island. They had mascots for it. They had like cartoons for it, like posters and stuff. And they made it an idea of pride. And what happened was people really rallied around it. It took a lot of work, but people really rallied around it. And then they went into schools. Those kids went home, talked to their parents about it. It became really a note of pride. And when it becomes a pride, when people fall in love with an animal or a habitat or anything around the ocean, they really take pride in saying, well, hold on a second. Why is this species being decreased? Right? Why is the population decreasing? Why is it a species at risk? If this is our bird, or our animal, let's bring it back. Let's do everything we can. And that's what happened. So what they did is they made people fall in love with this animal. And they made it a point of pride for this animal. And then once that pride kicked in, it was just kind of like, here's the way you can protect this animal. And all of a sudden it went up in population. So they got governments involved because the people wanted it. Put pressure on the government saying, okay, if you guys want this, we're going to bring it back. And I think it had to do with habitat destruction and whatnot. So they started protecting habitats, and this bird started to flourish. Right? It didn't go extinct. And it started to rebound back. So that's sort of the Rare approach. And it's very similar to trying to change behavior. And I don't know a lot about it because I'm just starting to know about it. And when I went to Duke, it was a really interesting process to learn. It was a retreat, and I got to meet all the other people involved, and it was just a lot of fun. And one person I got to meet was the actual course instructor. His name's Brian Day, and he's essentially sort of the guy to look to for social marketing. And he teaches in this course. He actually has 2 courses for the certificate. So this certificate is 4 courses to get the certificate, and then there's other courses you can take for interest's sake, to improve. A lot of these executive education courses are to actually improve your business, like your skill set for your for your career. It's a really great process to do it, and they have really great, they have how to use social media. They also have social marketing. They have how to do documentaries. I'm working to develop a podcast course, so it's a lot of fun, and it's really interesting in a lot of ways. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be getting Brian Day on this podcast at some point. I'm hoping in September. And we're going to be really looking into that. And once that happens, what I want to do is work with you guys, the audience, on how to use the skill set to further change human behavior around your friends, family, for the ocean, right? And I think it's important. I think now that I know there's a difference between making people aware and changing their behavior around the ocean, making people aware of the ocean and changing their behavior. That's a big deal, and I'm looking forward to sort of introducing you to this topic and going through with you and having Brian on here to help us, really start to use the proper ways, if we can, the proper ways to change human behavior. Change the behavior of our friends and family, change the behavior of our social media networks, and really start to hone in on that. Because there's one thing about making them aware. That's one thing. The other thing is we really have to change. We really have to change behavior. And we may not be able to change everybody's behavior, but we can focus in on certain people that are willing to change their behavior for something. And I think that's really important. And I'm going to end on that note. I'd love to hear what you think. Go to the Speak Up for Blue Facebook group, speakupforblue.com/group. If you're not part of the group already, all you have to do is request to join. I'll let you in within 24 hours. If you are part of the group, go in. Let me know what you think of this social marketing and behavioral change. I'm not going to do like an entire lesson, but I want to give you guys, with this, myself and you guys, with the skill set that you're able to, that we're all able to go out and change human behavior for the ocean or around the ocean, because I think that's really important in the future of Speak Up for Blue, is to really provide that change. And it's always a good thing to learn new skills and how to go forth and do that. So I just want to thank you very much for listening. You have been listening to Speak Up for Blue podcast. I want you guys to have a happy Monday. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a happy Monday and happy conservation.